What's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I've got a full house. Welcome tonight, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What's good, guys?
On today's podcast, we are going to be reviewing the EFL Cup fourth round matches, which is essentially the round of 16 from this week, and we'll also preview match week 11 of the Premier League coming up this weekend. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, if you're free to get in touch with us via email, we love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Okay, let's get straight into it. Mac, the first game, of course, West Ham 3, Arsenal 1. I would expect this game to have gone a different way, but both teams had a lot of changes for this fixture. And I think both teams had players out to make a statement for their respective teams to maybe push for a starting berth. The likes of maybe Benrahma for West Ham, Kudus, who's been playing well recently but hasn't necessarily started every game. But then also for Arsenal, Trossard, Havertz, Vieira, the likes of these guys. And so what were your takes on overall this game?
Overall, this game kind of played as expected, where you see Arsenal heavily dominating possession, and Newcastle West Ham focusing on the break, trying to be able to get in the counterattack in transitional moments, which they are kind of one of the teams that are most reliant on as few passes as possible to be able to create a shot creating action. They're actually the lowest in the Premier League, so they're just really focused on playing defensive, sitting back, being comfortable, playing well defensively, and then seeing if they can hit their opponent on the break, which they were very successful today. I think the difference in this game, I think you want to give first West Ham their credit because they took the chances that were presented to them. Also, some of them were literally kind of given to them, Ben White, because I don't know what that corner header you're trying to do there, brother. That's just I come on a podcast and I sing your praises, and this is how you do it. It's not the time for this. But I think a lot of discredit has to go to Arsenal because they lacked a lot of incision in their passing, in their movement. It very much felt lackluster, where everything was maybe about 15 yards outside of the West Ham 18-yard box, and they were just kind of slowly rotating the ball side to side. Couldn't really cut through the middle, couldn't really make any penetrative runs or penetrative passing. And that's what really I felt like spelled their downfall, where as soon as that first goal went in for West Ham, they have to press further and further. Arteta was forced to bring on substitutions that in all likelihood he didn't want to have to make going into a tough fixture that we'll speak about later. But they really shot themselves in the foot, having to play guys that they didn't want to be able to play and coming out with a loss. So it's really worst case scenario given this fixture, how could have played off Arsenal. But like I said, you still give credit to West Ham because they stuck to the game plan. They knew their job. They did the business. And as you highlighted, a player that you both, I think Ray, you spoke quite a bit about is Mohamed Kudus coming on, scoring a phenomenal goal to kind of even push further Arsenal further down to make sure that they had to even press on the gas further to get back into the game potentially. They weren't successful in doing so, but how was he able to take that touch around Zinchenko and finish it smartly? Very well done. So overall, well deserved from West Ham. And I think it, again, if we were to dive a little bit and dissect Arsenal a little bit, has been when they played poorly, this is an example of what they've done. And it's fortunate it came back to kind of bite them in the butt in this game again.
Yeah, and so Mac mentioned, of course, great sort of system that West Ham played, and they really stuck to their game plan. I think over 70% possession from Arsenal in this game, but conceded a goal, essentially an own goal. And then in the second half, you expect Arsenal, how they have been for the last year and a half. They start strong in the second half, and of course, when they are down a goal. But very early in the second half, Mohamed Kudus able to bring that ball down from Agard. Cutting inside, Zinchenko put a far post, make it 2-0, and another hill to climb for Arsenal, who didn't look as fluid with, of course, a lot of changes in that side. Is there concern about that, or do you think with, a lot of your starters sitting off, that would just come with those players playing more regularly with each other?
Yeah, no, I think the fluidity was off, and I think to what Max said, I think everything was just a step off from Arsenal. Even the way they were closing out, even the chance, the chance by Jared Bowen, which was a deflection. I thought there were two players kind of like thinking about stepping in, and they didn't end up. Neither one of those players actually committed into stepping into Jared Bowen. So I think, yes, the lack of playtime with this group of 11, does contribute to that. But I don't know. It just didn't feel like they were, up to really want to play, the League Cup. And for their aspirations, maybe they don't want to be in this competition. They want to focus on other things, and the two main things being the Champions League and the league itself. So I'm not mad that they're out. I don't think many Arsenal fans will be. There are other ways that they can achieve a treble. And the fact of the matter is, they're going to be playing far too many games. It seems like injuries are creeping up on them, as they are creeping up with a lot of teams. Tamiyasu just came back from injury. Bukayo Saka just came back from a knock. How how much can they risk playing these types of games? So, for that matter, yes, it is a loss, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it does play well for Arsenal.
Yeah, and so yeah, very upbeat loss, I guess, on your end, Gio, for this Arsenal side. But I think, yeah, you're right. I think it's a win-win for both teams. Of course, never good to lose a game, but you're out of a competition likely that Arsenal really didn't expect to go. Didn't really prioritize this year. Of course, if they were able to go further, I think they would have taken the chance. But not the end of the world. They are still fighting for the Champions League and the Premier League as well. So that's something off of your plate. For West Ham, they were off the back of 3 back-to-back results, which came in losses, and so this was a much-needed win for them. Of course, beating an Arsenal team at home and getting 3 goals, where honestly, if it's against another team on another day, I don't expect Jared Bowen to be the starting striker and to create a lot of havoc for West Ham. I still think that they do need a lot of reinforcement at the striker position, considering the goals that they got. Own goal, Mohamed Kudus piece of magic, and then a essentially a Jared Bowen deflection that they got. So credits to them, but I don't necessarily think this result should be looked at too much into for both teams. I just think that it's a great way for West Ham to get into winning ways, put a couple of those losses behind them, and then for Arsenal to really just, you're out of this competition, but you get some playing time for a lot of those players who haven't seen as much of the pitch. Kiwior, of course, being one of them. And yeah, you get to rest some of those players for the upcoming weekend. But let's move on to another match that we're gonna cover now, and that's Man U 0, Newcastle 3, back-to-back 3-0 home defeats for Man U at this point.
Love it.
And
Love
very much, very much like we talked about Arsenal losing in the EFL Cup. Do you think this is a good result for Man U to be out of this competition? What do you think?
At this point, they should be out of all competitions, maybe even the Premier League, because this is bad. It's bad, but I almost feel like at this point, it's better to hit rock bottom and start from the beginning again. They haven't fully reached the bottom, and they keep throwing on these bandages, and it's obviously more prevalent now than ever, and it just isn't working. So I think fans should almost be happy that this is happening, because something needs to change. And if the Glazers pulled out of the deal with the Saudis, obviously, or the Qataris, this isn't going to drive the value of the club any higher. Constantly losing money. It's a depreciating asset at this point. So who really wants to buy this club at this point? So there's a lot going on in the back end, but I think this loss in general, they also looked a step slow. Newcastle were finding the seams, no closing out in terms of the Lewis Hall goal, the goal from Almiron. Poor defending, Dallo doesn't check his shoulder, obviously. Miggy makes a great run. All of it. It was just very slow, step slow. Casemiro didn't look great all game. Mason Mount looked, subpar. And yeah, these guys aren't getting a lot of minutes in the, during Premier League games either, and it shows why. But yeah, no, I think as these losses rack up, it becomes clearer each loss that they need to hit rock bottom and start on a clean slate.
Interesting. Yeah, I honestly wasn't sure what to expect from this fixture. I thought both teams would be rotated a lot, but I thought it would have been a great chance for Man U to get a decent win at home against Newcastle. But of course, we saw Newcastle came out with a game plan, very direct when they won the ball, and of course, it shows in the first goal that came through. A great piece of play by Livramento, the right back, who I think dispossesses Garnacho, drives at the Man U back line. Like you said, Gio, Dow loses his runner, Amran, who finished a far post, and honestly, I think that's the story of Man U so far, Mac, where it looks okay, but it's undone by poor defending and not a lot of will to fight. It looks like at this point. What were your takes from this result?
Again, I feel like it was much of the same. It was very disappointing because for me that one's bad. But what's worse for me is when I know I kind of pillage this guy individually. I don't think he's the greatest of player, but he's playing well sometimes in Newcastle. Sure, if Joe Willock is running rampant against your midfield,
Former Arsenal player,
you're having
Star by the way.
Having trouble because that second goal, the one for Lewis Hall, where literally both Casimir and Dallo, like you felt their controller lagged, they paused, they froze, they were skipping frames or something because they froze as Almiron just simply dinked it over them, and you have Joe Willock running onto it, outpacing you in that position when you have a lead at a point. So again, lots of questions. The tough part again, I think for Manchester United, they just gotta pray for an away game to get away from this crowd at some points as well, because what they're trying to do, I could understand, again, if you squint really, really hard, you could see a thought process of how they're trying to structure what they're doing. They're just not doing it well. So I don't know what's going on in the training pitch. Everyone is blaming everybody else. Like you have Tannock saying, "Oh, we're playing fine. It's just not going on our luck." You have different commentators blaming the ownership. You have different commentators blaming the individuals on the pitch. You have people blaming Ten Hag. It seems like if the blame pie where it's getting to the point where one pie isn't sufficient for the blame. Everyone needs their own pie. It's all horrible across all boards. There isn't really a positive momentum coming out, which is the worst part. Because if there was some semblance of positivity where they're creating opportunities, it's just isn't going their way, that there is some hope, or there's one player that's kind of, playing very, very well, and, that you can kind of hang your hat on, you might feel some sort of positivity coming out of it, but there's none of that. It's all negativity all the time with Manchester United right now. And as a little bit of a Manchester United hater myself, it's kind of fun. After watching the Arsenal game to immediately flip on this, to see Newcastle do this to Man U, I had a good day. So overall, no complaints.
Yeah, I'm gonna pile on a little bit more here, Gio, before I give it to you again. Yeah, not a great look, especially because again, it's another game where they don't score at home. Looking at Anthony Martial coming on as a backup striker, I'm thinking, you know what, this might be your chance. A lot of those forwards are not hitting form right now. Could the black gloves, short sleeve Martial make a comeback and prove our boy Cav right? Unfortunately for him and Man U fans, it didn't turn out that way. And so, yeah, it's not a great look considering Man U, apart from the Harry Maguire goal against Copenhagen, a couple of Scott McTominay goals here and there, haven't looked great going forward either. And so this just adds on to how bad of a time Man U have had. That being said, Fulham this weekend, a game where they can put things right. And then after that, Copenhagen, Luton Town, a break for internationals, Everton, and the Galatasaray in the coming fixtures. Do you see any positivity and a way back for Man U starting this weekend against Fulham in the Premier League?
If you're being optimistic, yeah, you can try to reach and say you can. But to be honest, to be quite frank with you, no. Like, what have they done in the past 3 weeks, or the past 3 games rather, in which you can say confidently that they're going to go out there and outplay the Fulham side? I just don't see it. I don't see it. Fulham, you can't count them out either. They have a decent side. They have, who's that guy who was supposed to go to Bayern?
Oh, Jalpino.
João Paulinho. That guy alone can really outplay the whole of Manchester United squad right now. So With that being said, I'm looking past this week. Hopefully, Copenhagen and Luton can possibly be wins under their belt, but Fulham, I, I I I can't guarantee it. And this coming from a Manchester United fan, uh, albeit a non-delusional one, like the other ones out there. But I can't confidently say that they will beat them and or even draw at this point. They there is no confidence in that dressing room. There is no confidence. I don't think the players have confidence in the manager apart from say the ones that he has coached previously. Just Anthony Martial, and maybe Malacia, who's out, so he doesn't really have a say at this point. But apart from that, I don't think the locker room really has much trust in the team itself, and especially Eric Ten Hag.
Yeah, and that's I think last point on Man U, the part that really doesn't look good at this point is even players like Garnacho, who there's a lot of hype around him, a lot of expectation. Even him, as someone that could be looked on as a savior in a way to come and turn the season around. Even if I'm him, I wouldn't really want to be in that position right now, considering how toxic the environment is. So, how hard will it be for those players on the fringes who rely on a good run of form and confidence to get things going for Man U? It's not a great look for them. So, yeah, we're definitely gonna keep an eye out on that situation. But let's finish off the EFL Cup round off with Liverpool Bournemouth. I think on the flip side, and now we're talking about my team, of course, Liverpool. There's a lot of changes that were made in this fixture for Liverpool, and a lot of players looking to make a claim for some of those spots that arguably are still not cemented. Of course, you have Salah, Van Dijk, your goalkeepers. Those positions are cemented, but you still have a lot of other positions that players could be challenging for. And I think with Liverpool being in multiple competitions, it actually is a good thing at this point because there's a lot of rotation happening. Liverpool are able to continue to win even when there's a lot of changes, and the system stays relatively the same. 2-1 winners on the day, but it wasn't necessarily the most convincing either. I think both teams had over 15 shots in this game, so it just tells you, Mac, how anytime Liverpool play, you can expect, I think, a very entertaining game. But what were your takes on this game?
I think this was important for Liverpool to be able to come out with the win because this is their. I don't mean to say that they're not in any other competition, but I feel like the start of the kind of the rebound cycle of what Klopp can do for this team is maybe picking up a cup competition like this, as well as potentially finishing the Champions League or getting close to the Premier League title. I don't think that, as they said, they had a carbon copy paste of what Manchester United season was last year in terms of end season results. I think if you ask a Liverpool fan, 9 times out of 10, they'll take that for this year because that's a foundation of what they can start to do after they potentially bring in more reinforcements, either in January or next summer, and kind of make those final tweaks around the edges of the new system that they're trying to build out, especially kind of the bigger change with Trent in the center of midfield. So I think this was an important result to kind of continue to build that foundation. In terms of individual players or takeaways, it's very interesting because I think that a player that I've kept my eye on whenever he does show up for Liverpool specifically has been Harvey Elliott, because I feel like he's a very different type of player than they have in terms of kind of being like a water bug, right? Like kind of like an attacking midfielder, but trying to, but a little bit different than what Szoboszlai or McAllister might type of play, where it's a lot more, I would say, pace, a lot more action versus being more of a necessarily a creative player. I think that in this individual game, he showed good points and he showed some very poor points where in the final third, I still questioned his decision-making a little bit. I'm very interested what will end up happening because I think that the crux of what happens for Liverpool, if they're able to take that next step, is that midfield position. Is it a Curtis Jones? Is it a Gravenberch? Is it a Harvey Elliott that's able to complete a trio at some sense? Or maybe even overtake one of the other players if a bigger name defensive midfielder is brought in. So I think that a player like him, I think it's a little interesting. He didn't perform well in this individual game, I feel like. But overall, I think with Liverpool, this was a good step forward in terms of what they want to be able to accomplish in the long term.
I love how you mentioned that because just like how we expect a lot of things from Harvey Elliott, but he's not really performing as well right now. course, Darweezy special. He's
Yes.
going to come on, have a horrendous touch, which actually sets him up to have a perfect one-on-one situation, and then he just has a world-class finish, which is the story for Liverpool. It looks like it might go one way, and then it completely switches the other way. But that being said, Gio, just to round it off, I'm going to read out to you the quarterfinal matches, which are Everton Fulham, Port Vale Middlesbrough, Chelsea Newcastle, and Liverpool West Ham. Realistically, this has to be Liverpool's to lose. I think, apart from maybe Newcastle. Will it be a disappointment if Liverpool don't win this competition from this point on?
Wait. What about Chelsea? We didn't talk about Chelsea. What are you talking about?
Okay,
You're not scared of Chelsea?
Listen, they're facing a better London squad, so it's going to be West Ham if anything. But no, I think absolutely. I think Liverpool sees this as an opportunity. I think any club in their position should see this as an opportunity. One, to get a trophy under your belt coming into the season, not thinking much of it in terms of, how many trophies are we win? Are we that type of club that we're going to go out there and say we need to win as many trophies as we can? If they can get this one under the belt, that would be fantastic. It'd be a boost in confidence for everyone, and just, it'll allow the club to continue to back Klopp and understand that even through what they consider a turbulent time in terms of players in and players out, not knowing the future for Mo Salah. Even till now, we still don't know if the season goes poorly enough, we could see Mo Salah gone, or if the season goes well enough, how are we gonna transition him out? Yes, we pay him a lot, but he is on the older side now. But yeah, no, this would be fantastic for everyone who is on Liverpool to get at least one trophy. Although it being a Carabao Cup, I think a trophy nonetheless is great for the club, especially for the guys, like the newer guys into the club who haven't won with the guys who have been in the club longer. Getting that together, letting them feel how it is to win as a Liverpool player, win a trophy, and lift a trophy as a Liverpool player will be fantastic for their future.
Yeah, well, you heard it there, boys. We're going to finish off this part now, so we'll take a break now, and then we'll be back with some Premier League preview. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now discussing some of the Premier League games taking place this weekend. The first one we're going to discuss now is Newcastle versus Arsenal. These two teams played out a 0-0 tie at the Emirates before Arsenal beat Newcastle 2-0 at St. James's Park last season. But I feel like this game is kind of hard to tell, actually. Newcastle at home could cause problems. We saw it this season already with PSG coming and getting spanked there. But of course, Arsenal, still undefeated in the Premier League, will be looking to make another push and chase down Spurs at the top of the table. What are your, what are your expectations from this game?
I think one of two things has to break. It's either you're looking at most recent run of form, which is in favor of Newcastle because they're unbeaten the last 6 league games, 4 wins and 2 draws, and scoring twice in each of the last 5 games. So they've been on a tear. Versus historically, this fixture, and especially against Arsenal, they've not done well. They've just won 1 of the last 10 Premier League games against Arsenal, losing 8, and failing to score in 8 of those games as well. So this matchup has not been in their favor. But this very much feels like a different Newcastle side. I know we just talked about the result with Manchester United, but to be fair to them, they've been doing that to a lot of teams. And since after the first couple weeks of the season, where they started off a little bit slow, was weird. As the schedule got busier, they got better. And it'll be interesting to see if they'll be able to carry that form into this game, where I feel like is probably the biggest test these two teams have faced up till now, with a certain level of expectations that they have. I understand there was the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham, but that derby, that just has a different feeling. In terms of a regular fixture of what you're going to expect in the Premier League, facing a quality team, and being more on even footing, where like Arsenal, when they're facing Man City, you kind of anticipated you're playing against a better team. This, I feel like they have the opportunity to still feel comfortable going at in this Newcastle backline, trying to create opportunities, because this hasn't been the same defense that it was last year. You can't get opportunities on them, but vice versa. Newcastle have the potency up front to be able to create for themselves. And you can see from the rotations from the previous games that we talked about, where they very much were eyeing this game. I was talking about watching, kind of going through some of the highlights with Rays, where Newcastle, even though they knew that they won the game, they still subbed on Kieran Trippier and Bruno Guimaraes for whatever reason, I don't know. But the same thing for Arsenal, where they, again, maybe just for trolling, I don't know, or to ruin Gio's day even further. All things that are positive for me. But on the other side, you saw Declan Rice, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli had to come on, where, you probably, if you ask the managers and kind of gave them truth serum, I know I always love to give managers truth serum, they wouldn't have wanted to play any of those boys at all, because this is the fixture that they're worried about. They need to be able to see if they could get 3 points, because either team comes out with the win, we feel differently about them. Arsenal then continue our chasing down that Tottenham team being in the title race, or Newcastle, are they themselves now entering it because they started off slow, but they picked it up, and if they get 3 points here, they may be kind of closing the gap with the leaders at the table. So overall, very excited to see what happens, and I really think it is the proverbial coin toss of what could happen in this game.
Yeah, it's like I said, Gio, it's hard to tell what's going to happen, but I think I would slightly favor Arsenal in this game, considering the list of injuries that Newcastle have. Sven Botman, Alex Isak, Sandro Tonali, of course, he's out for other reasons. Harvey Barnes, Jacob Murphy, and Elliot Anderson. Those are some of the injuries that Newcastle will have to deal with ahead of this fixture, but most importantly, Jorginho was interviewed after the end of the West Ham Arsenal game, and he said, we can go and put things right with a win at Newcastle. So, of course, if Jorginho is saying that, Arsenal fans should be feeling good for themselves. Whether he plays or not in this game, he's still, a very important Arsenal player. But what are your takes on this game, Gio?
No, shut up, Gio. First of all, that's a horrible question how you phrase that. Jorginho's not an important player. He should not be touching the pitch. Partey's faking an injury and doing his baby gender reveals instead of goddamn playing football. What is going on here? I don't like any of this. But I apologize, Gio. You go ahead. Tell us how much you love Jorginho.
Look, Jorginho, if he touches the pitch against Newcastle, he's getting cooked. I don't care what anybody says. He is getting cooked. I think Guimaraes is really just hoping that they're forced to start him, because I think he'll have a great time playing against them. But yeah, no, to talk about the game very quickly, I just think, again, Newcastle have just come off quite, a lopsided win. So I think for them, they'll be eager to get back on the pitch and see what else they can do. They have known, again, like Max said, to very, dominate teams after a couple of weeks, and not to say that they would dominate Arsenal by any means, but they're definitely going to put up a challenge. And I think this is probably, arguably, the game of the weekend to watch. Two big sides, two clubs with very big aspirations this season. So, when these teams are matching up, I think, again, it's going to be won and lost in the midfield. I think Arsenal have, again, the better midfield. Unless Jorginho plays, then I'm going full Newcastle. So put your bets in for Newcastle, boys.
That being said, though, I do agree as well, Gio, with that. Arsenal have the better midfield going in, but that with Newcastle, even if they're at home, I don't expect them really to try to outpossess Arsenal. So I think key areas would be one-on-ones. Both fullbacks for Newcastle will be facing up against quite tricky and capable wingers in Saka and Martinelli. So, of course, Dan Burn and Trippier gonna have their hands full in this game, Mac. I'm liking the chance for Arsenal. Obviously, with Saka being able to draw multiple defenders and creating from there, I expect something big from him, considering he rested most of the game for West Ham, and I don't think he really was used too much against their win at Sheffield. So, what are your expectations from an offensive and from Arsenal?
I think that, so thus far this season, I saw kind of a map of how Arsenal have tried to enter, where their passes have come to reach into the final third on the pitch, and roughly about 39% of their overall possessions in terms of penetrative passes getting to the final third has been on the right-hand side. That's almost 40%. And about 25% has been on the left wing side. And what I'm talking about is the far wing position, so completely ignoring the center of the pitch. So overall, in terms of if you break it up into 5 areas of the pitch where Arsenal try to attack, if you look at from a striker to attacking midfielders and 2 wingers, it's really been zeroed in on Saka and Martinelli throughout how they're going to be able to get into the final third and create opportunities. So I think interesting enough for Arsenal is to flip that on the head. I think Newcastle's going to know that. I understand defensively, Kieran Trippier is not the best defender in the fullback position, but he's decent enough. Matt Targett is injured, so in all likelihood you're going to see a Dan Burn against Saka. So I think what they're going to do is probably double and triple up on those players, which should theoretically free up more space in the center mid for Odegaard. And I think that's probably going to be Arsenal's key player, because Newcastle are probably going to know they're going to focus a lot of their attack out on the winger side, and that should free up space for him and a player like Nketiah. I know, unfortunately, should have a lot of space centrally if they can time their movements, and if they're able to quickly move the ball side to side. Should they find those penetrative passes in the middle, that's where the area of the space will be. Arsenal, I think that's been their differentiator between last year and this year, where they've been so wing focused because they're so slow in possession. That's the only outlet they have. And that's why they haven't created as many opportunities that you've seen in comparison to last year. So this, I think going into this fixture is an opportunity for them, because I think that's much more of a well-known threat and something that Arsenal have more so focused on. They need to look at different avenues of breaking down teams, and players like Declan Rice, Odegaard, depending where Declan Rice is playing, of course, if he's further deeper as a 6 or an 8, and Nketiah need to have kind of one of their better games in the season. And to my opinion, I know Nketiah scored a hat-trick against Sheffield, but aside from that game, both him and Odegaard, I would argue, have had a lackluster start thus far to the season. So I think they do need to pick it up going against this very deadly Newcastle team.
Yeah, very deadly is also, I would say, not necessarily the best word to describe him right now. Of course, Callum Wilson got 2 goals against Wolves, but realistically, if it's Isak, he's going to be starting, and it can be deadly. But just thinking about their offense right now, I'm not necessarily. They did beat Man U 3-0 just now, but I don't necessarily think that they'll be scoring too many goals. So if you guys are looking to over and under for goals, that might be an indication there. But let's move on then, guys, to another match that's taking place this weekend. Actually, I think it's taking place, if I'm not mistaken, Monday afternoon, actually. That's Spurs, of course, top of the table Spurs against Chelsea, who are 11th in the Premier League. Gio, Ange Postecoglou says fans should, dream about potentially winning the league. He's not going to dampen their positivity and their optimism so far. And of course, this is the Pochettino derby. He is going to be returning to Spurs for the first time, I think, as a Premier League manager. So what are your expectations from this game, Gio?
Look, I don't blame Postecoglou for saying that. Like we said, like I said at least a couple of podcasts ago, if they beat Fulham, I think they should definitely be in the conversation. As much as we disrespect their bottling and their lack of trophies, I think you kind of have to loop them in that conversation, no matter how serious or not serious you think they are contenders. Now, against this Chelsea side, I think they can exploit them the way they've been exploiting other teams. I don't think Chelsea's transitional defense has been fantastic either. But yeah, I genuinely don't believe Chelsea can defend the counterattack. Now it goes to Spurs, whether Spurs can, handle Chelsea's sort of offense as well. I think they have a better shot. I think through and through, they don't have to do much because Chelsea doesn't really create shots from outside the box. Most of their goals have been scored from within by Raheem Sterling, by Nicholas Jackson. But yeah, no, I just think Spurs are going to play a little bit more grittier and kind of frustrate Chelsea. They'll even sit back a lot, let Chelsea kind of do more of the ball handling. But Chelsea hasn't proved that they can really possess the game and really dominate the game in that sense either. So, I'm actually siding with Spurs here, and I'm quite confident in siding with Spurs. And maybe then, when I start siding with Spurs, they'll start losing. So, maybe that's the key. So, I actually quite like Spurs' chances against Chelsea this week.
Well, of course, this is an interesting one because, like Gio said, Mac, Spurs deadly on the break so far this season. Chelsea not great going forward. So if they just let Chelsea make their own mistakes, that could be a game plan. But you can't really count out how well Spurs have started, and Postecoglou is very positive in the way they approach games, especially going forward. So if we do see realistically a 3-0 convincing Spurs win here, have they cemented themselves as, one of those title contenders for the season? Even though it's just Chelsea who are 11th so far this season. What are your thoughts?
No, it's just Chelsea who are 11th in the season. You're facing arguably a mid-table team. Like, I think what might be interesting is that just like Chelsea kind of got up for the Arsenal game in a lot of ways, they might have the potential, maybe a derby can kind of inspire some life into them. I would argue in that individual game, Arsenal only had to play well for 8 minutes and manage a 2-2 draw because they played probably their worst game of the season every other minute of that game. So I think it'll be very interesting to see, because if you look at, it's a fun number I like to always look at, expected goals. Do you know Chelsea actually have a higher amount of expected goals so far this season than Spurs? And considering where they're on the table, it's 18.2 versus 17.6 expected goals thus far this season. So Chelsea offensively, they create more opportunities. The interesting will be are the odds going to be in their favor this matchup? And to be honest, who knows? It's impossible to know. There is no way to guess in terms of what type of Chelsea team we're going to be able to see. I think what will be very interesting to see on my end is that both of these teams thus far this season, when they've wanted to in certain games, I guess I'll say against lesser opponents, have really tried to dominate possession through different means. Generally, you see Maddison dropping very, very deep for the Spurs team, collecting possession and trying to build them up. Similarly, Enzo Fernandez for Chelsea. It'd be interesting to see that midfield battle, who comes out on top. Overall, I think that even though Spurs have been in better form, because they're the derby, I do want to throw a little bit of that out. I do lean Spurs, but not by much, just because they have that little bit of extra oomph up top between Son. Really, to be honest, that's pretty much it. They have the extra oomph to be able to finish. I don't see too much difference between over Charleston or Nicholas Jackson. They're just two different players that play for different countries. That's it for me. That's it pretty much between their finishing abilities, to be honest. Though I do find it interesting. Who in terms of positive mentalities, and I'm going to take it to a different sport just for a little bit of fun. Do you think the Ange positive kind of run of form, it's been lasted for Premier League season since August or November, so 2.5 months, right? Who do you think is going to have a longer positive stretch throughout the rest of their respective seasons? Ange Postecoglou and Spurs being in happy momentum, or James Harden on the Los Angeles Clippers? When does because the positivity is going to end for both of them. It's not a matter of if, but when. Who has a longer timeline of being happy?
It's Ange Postecoglou. Because listen, different sport, maybe a different podcast, but I truly do not like that trade. It is sickening for any party involved for that to happen. Sorry, this has to be longer than it is, but if James Harden thinks he's going to walk in there and dribble for 21 seconds of 24-second shot clock, he is horribly mistaken. Kawhi's off that team. And Paul George it's less than 2.5 months of joy. Because again, for me, there is going to be a downturn for Spurs. It's not a matter of if, but when they're going to hit the rough patch. And of course, as we know for Spurs, it could all just crumble from beneath. But Ray, I know you are a Harden fan, so same question to you: who experiences more joy this season?
So I'm actually on board with Gio there. I don't understand the trade at all. Just to make that point, but bringing it back to Spurs and their sort of season, they have Wolves next. So let's pretend they do win against Chelsea. They have Wolves next, and then Aston Villa, who are a trickier team this time around. But that's it for November. Again, no other cup competitions so far. So realistically, they could push all the way to December 3rd when they actually face City. And that could be realistically 3.5 months of good run of form, still top of the table, could be undefeated as well going into that City game. And so, yeah, to answer your question there, I think that really gives itself Spurs are giving themselves the most opportunity to sort of stick around in those areas. if they win the next couple of games, because as we know, they haven't realistically faced a necessarily top team at their best. And so that run of fixtures, when they do face Man City and then West Ham shortly after that, West Ham and then Newcastle, I think that will be more so the real test for Ange and his Spurs team. So we'll see. I think it's important for them to continue to pick up points if they want to try to finish, of course, challenge in the title. But of course, I think their goal is to challenge for the top four. And if they can pick up some more wins here, they're going to look in a great position going into that. But let's just round off the podcast then discussing one last game. We talked about West Ham already, but also wanted to mention Brentford. Of course, they came off of that 2-0 win away at Chelsea. And I think this game between Brentford and West Ham, who are 9th and 10th in the Premier League table, respectively, will be a lot closer than most people think, Gio. And so I wanted to toss it to you. These two teams rely heavily on set pieces, as we've seen with both West Ham and Brentford in the last games that they've played. How many would you go over or under on the total corners that will be played out in this game? Gio, what are your thoughts?
Degenerate.
I am strongly going with over. Always say, hey, listen, you guys know my line. You guys know my saying, hey, life's too short to take the under, guys. Go with the over. It's over all the time. No need to stress yourself on the under, because these teams almost want corners. So they'll be fishing for them as much as possible. A lot of play on the byline, so be sure to take the over.
Okay, and lastly, just to round off our podcast today, Mac, these two teams haven't started the season so hot, but this could be another way for Brentford to build up on that win at Chelsea, or West Ham, just beat Arsenal and broke that 3-game losing streak. They could also push themselves into the top half of the table and cement themselves there. Who do you think needs the win more in this game?
I think West Ham need to win a little bit more, because it was great to be able to pick up the win in the cup competition. But I think as they get further deep into not just this, also within Europa League as well, the fixture list is going to stockpile on them, and I think they have a little bit deeper of a squad, but still quite thin. So getting points early as possible on the board is going to be vital for them, whereas Brentford have that little bit more time, where their schedule isn't as heavy, where if they don't pick up points now, they'll have the opportunity to rest and recover and be able to get back at it later. So I think West Ham should be a little bit more desperate in this individual matchup, and I think it will say a lot to how they progress from last year to this year. In regards to your question you asked, Gio, I'm actually going to go with the under on corners. I don't think there'll be enough shots for there to be corners, to be honest. Like this is gonna, for me, is just gonna be long ball to center back to center back to center back to center back. Do you know what I mean? And it's just gonna be absolute chaos. A very boring game, but one that could have a very interesting result. So you never know. Anything could happen in the Premier League. But I'll go under. And for me, I always bet the under, because people always want to bet the over because they're positive, and I'm very much a negative person, which is why this podcast works so well.
Well, anyways, this concludes our podcast for today, guys. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Tuesday, when we review this weekend's Premier League games, and we'll also preview the upcoming Champions League games for next week. Until then, Mac, thank you.
Ben White, what were you doing, bruv? Come on.
Thank you, Gio.
Go Fulham, huh?
See you guys soon.